Hey everybody, and welcome to the Fart Fetish Podcast once again. We have another great episode with a guest today, so let me get the intros out of the way so we can jump right into it. The Fart Fetish Podcast is available on almost all major podcast platforms and releases episodes monthly, usually the first Friday of the month. You can also visit fartfetish.info, where you can find the podcast and some informative resources linked there. There's also a link to request an invite to the Discord server on the fartfetish.info website. Come join and talk about the fart fetish with us there. Also, I've been posting polls to my Twitter, @ClosetFetishist, so join in on the conversation somewhere, anywhere. And of course, if you want to be on the show, you can always reach out to me. My email is aproctophilia@gmail.com, and it's linked on fartfetish.info for your convenience. And that's it. I'd like to now introduce Raz, who is a fart fetishist here today to share his perspective on the fetish in his experience and some research he's done into some of the psychological and biological reasonings that explain that perhaps this fetish isn't so odd after all. That's today's episode on the Fart Fetish Podcast. At his request and for his privacy, I have altered his voice for this interview. Thanks very much for being here, Raz. Why don't we start with a little bit about yourself and what this fetish looks like for you? Like, what aspects and themes do you kind of enjoy around this fetish?
Well, for me, it really focuses, the main thing it focuses on is around one thing, which is virility and masculinity, I guess I would say.
I'm sorry, what was the first word you said?
Like virility.
Oh, virility, okay.
Like being masculine and just social and out there. That's always kind of been attractive to me. Like even back when I was a kid, I wasn't very social when I was a child. I didn't have a lot of friends, and the concept of having friends and being social and like being like one of the other boys, just being a masculine boy, just out there social with his other friends, that was attracted to me, but that wasn't what I was. And the kink, at least, I'll get into like the farting as part of this, but it was always such a taboo thing that males like only did around each other. It was like a bonding kind of thing. It was like friendship kind of thing. Like it was kind of taboo for girls to fart at all, and males could really only do it around other males. And as a male kid with no friends who like really is insecure in himself and wants to socialize with other guys but doesn't know how to, something like farting, you become attracted to it because it's such a male bonding thing, and that's something you want so badly that you just feel like you don't know how to do. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. It's very isolating because it's such a taboo thing, and it makes you very insecure in yourself.
For sure. Have you found any kind of community among people who do enjoy your interest, or maybe have done it with you, or something to that effect?
Yeah, on FetLife, there's a whole community of people who like it on there from my area of the country, all areas of the country actually. There's some dating apps have preferences for it. I'm not really a dating app person anymore. I was, but not anymore. But if you're into dating apps, there are some that have filters for it. Like it'll say farting, proctophilia. I mean, among a plethora of other fetishes that people are into, Twitter has a good community of people there. I like Twitter because you get to know the people. Like you get to have like one-on-one conversations, even though it is 100 and something characters. It's like you're interacting with them. You're getting to know them on a friend-to-friend basis. Oh, and Tumblr was really good for that back in the day too. Tumblr was really good for that back in like the late 10s when pornography was still out on there, but now it's off. It was a good place to interact with other people and find people. But most of that stuff is online. That's the thing. It's not really like in-person groups. That's hard to find, in my opinion.
Yeah. What was the last thing you said about the unfortunateness of it all being online?
Yeah, because it's online, if you're a person that craves the more like physical connection, like you want like to hug somebody, kiss somebody, or even not even sexually, you just want to like go out to dinner with somebody, romance. You want to do, go to a movie with somebody. You want to go traveling around the world with somebody on your like right by your side. It's like if you're a more physical person, the online stuff is not going to be as satisfying. That's just me. I know a lot of people like the online stuff, and I do too. But I like it more of as like a beginning thing, and then I want to transition into like being either friends or a relationship. Like I want to see each other in person if I'm like looking for somebody to share it with.
For sure. For sure. I hear you. I hear what you're saying there. So you're more you more gravitate towards the male on male farts segment. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I am bisexual, pansexual. I really don't label it. I like both, but I would consider I like both sexually. I can easily get a hard on to either a man or a woman, but I like men romantically. Like I couldn't I my drive to like if I were to marry somebody, it would be a man. I see myself living happily ever after with a man, even though I can get it off sexually to both. So that translates into the fetish also. I am attracted to women, just not their flatulence. Men, I'm attracted to all of them and their flatulence. It's a very bonding thing that makes being with a male just something that I would prefer, you know, as a life companion, a life partner. I would prefer a male.
For sure. For sure. Do you know when and like how you started having these fart fetish thoughts? Like what are the origins of them for you?
Back in elementary, like I said, I really wanted friends that I didn't have a lot, and because I was an outcast, I was a nerd. My interests didn't line up with that of the other kids. Back then, I was insecure about it. Now I embrace it. I don't want to be the same as everybody else. But back then, as a kid, you don't know any better, so you're insecure about it. And just walk like I was big into entertainment, and just like watching things like Scooby Doo, and like there's a lot of like male flatulence, and it's bonding friendship kind of way, and people are laughing and they're enjoying it. I like that. I like things like that, but not necessarily sexually yet. That didn't come until puberty. When I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, I wasn't thinking about it in a sexual way. It was just like a male bonding way. It was like funny. It was something I wanted to do because it was just a relaxing thing that men could do together that wasn't taboo. Because it was taboo if you did it around women, and it was taboo if women did it. But when it's around other guys, just in a friendly setting, it's fine. So I had fantasies about that kind of stuff in like a non-sexual way. But then I hit puberty, and it became sexual, and I wasn't really perplexed about it. It was just something that I enjoyed, that I didn't really see anything wrong with it. And then I found there was an online community, and I was like, oh, so this must be common. So that kind of like eased my way like into accepting myself for it. And then like I said, I was a nerd growing up, but like that was a benefit to me because I read a lot about stuff like paraphilias and shit, reading about like people like Sigmund Freud, other psychiatrists who studied this stuff. And, even if they found these fetishes and paraphilias disgusting to their own taste, they acknowledged that it was kind of just a normal aspect of the spectrum of how sexuality can go for humans. Like, they knew that it was just sexuality, especially for men. Sexuality is very spontaneous. It can go a variety of ways. And even if they're personally disgusted by it, and they might slip those biases into there, they acknowledge at the core that, it's harmless, and they like it, then it doesn't inhibit on their ability to be moral citizens of society. They just need to be educated about harm. And that really helped me just solidify my acceptance of it. Just seeing how even just old sexologists described paraphilias, and even just researching what paraphilias are, and how is like it led me to ask myself, is a propophilia, should it be considered a paraphilia? Because if a paraphilia is a sexual, you getting sexually aroused by something abnormal, well, what is abnormal? Abnormal, differs for different people, and it differs relative to people's biology and people's environment. And it kind of led me on a quest to scientifically dig into it.
Nice. Nice. Is that you mentioned wanting to come on the show to speak about specifically your story. Would you say that's essentially part of it, the origins and the where you've come to now with it?
Yeah, definitely. I just consider myself a normal person, really, just with a sexual kink that most people nowadays would consider abnormal. Um, but you know, I do think it's natural. I just think it's a natural part of the range of human sexuality. Especially when you consider pheromones. Like people, men sweat, women sweat, and both genders give off different pheromones that attract people to them. It said that men give off pheromones that like attract gay men and straight women, and the opposite for women. They give off pheromones that attract straight men and lesbians. And it's not really uncommon to be attracted to how your partner smells. Like that's not really something that is so taboo. It's kind of normal to like smells, at least like the outer smell of like your partner. And I just thought to myself, like, if it's acceptable for women to say, "Oh, I like my man's scent," or for men to say, "Oh, I like how my woman smells, a perfume, cologne," like it's acceptable to like the outer smell of someone you're aroused by, but the inner smell is considered taboo. Like the inner smell coming from their gut bacteria, which is still a part of their biology. It's no less a part of their biology than sweat is. And I was watching a YouTube video by these two sex educators, and one of them put it really good. He said, people who have a proctophilia may be just attracted by your inner biology, like how you are on the inside, your inner scent, which is not that abnormal if you think about it from like a wider sexual viewpoint. That, yeah, we are attracted to how our partner smells. That's a normal part of sexuality, like deep into our gut and our biology. And everybody has different bacteria in their gut, so everybody's biology smells different. So for me, my attraction to flatulence, it's only towards guys that I'm already attracted to. Like I'm not attracted to like everybody's flatulence. Like, I have limits, and there are some, like I said, women, not really fond of their flatulence. Men who I'm not attracted to, I'm not really fond of their flatulence. It's only men that I am attracted to. So it just combined with, it's not like an intrusive fetish that like everywhere I go I can't stop, being aroused with flatulence. But that together with, scientific research on pheromones, and I think it should be like reevaluated. Like, is it really that abnormal or atypical of a fetish if you think about it from just like a broader viewpoint?
Absolutely. It's an interesting thought, which you actually, I want to come back to this in a minute, but you actually wrote about you wrote a blog post that you wanted to have posted on the website. Can you talk a little bit about that and what, talk a little bit about the theory and the idea you have here?
Yeah, a lot of that blog post was really inspired by a book that I had picked up from Amazon. It's called I think it's called Perv, the Sexual Deviant in Us All. It's a really good book. It's by an American psychiatrist. Yeah, he's a psychiatrist. His name is Jesse Bering. Bering. That's how you spell his last name. And it was a very eye-opening book. It was kind of like the cherry on top of like all my years of just researching this scientifically. And he specifically believes that paraphilias and fetishes, they should not be judged by disgust, how much disgust they cause us. And, I agree with him. I think some fetishes are more accepted in mainstream, sex culture because they don't cause an ick factor. But the ick factor is subjective to each individual brain, each individual mind. So you can't really judge a paraphilia by an ick factor because that's subjective. Everybody has their own side of the story. What's trash to you is treasure to another person and vice versa. So he thinks that they should be judged by something objective, which is, do they cause harm to the person who has the fetish or anybody else? And that's what I agree with him. I feel like proctophilia falls into that category of, is it atypical? To most people, yes, but to the ones who have it, it's not. And our opinion matters just as much as theirs. So it really shouldn't be judged as an abnormal thing. It's a natural part of, the human system. And going back to the pheromones, like I said, those are just inner pheromones caused by the bacteria going on in your gut. It shouldn't, why is it weird to be aroused by that? But it's not weird to talk about how much that hot guy smells good because he sweats a lot. Pheromones are in play in both. So what's so strange about it, out there about it? Yeah, that book cites a lot of scientific sources. Scientific papers are quoted. If you're a fan of psychology, sexology, just anything having to do with the mind and sex, and I really recommend that book. It's a really good book, and it talks about the Kinsey scale of sexuality and how in the 40s Alfred Kinsey reported that a lot of men actually have more out there a lot of heterosexual men that label themselves heterosexual, they have a lot more interest in like alternate, like sexual, what they viewed back then as like alternate sexual like arousals, which included homosexuality. And obviously now it's been reclassified. It's not an illness anymore. But back then they unfortunately viewed it as such. He caught that this wasn't really a perversion. This was kind of common in the like general male population, Like this wasn't like a sickness. It's it's kind of a spectrum that any male can be on, and a lot of males are on, but don't really want to admit it. And they're kind of hiding it from the rest of you guys. So anybody could be on the spectrum. So he was kind of like warning people, like not warning people, but just saying like, stop being prejudiced because, more men are like this than you think. Not really that weird. I completely agree with that. It might gross people out. And the author, he says something in that book that I really like. I encourage everyone to pick it up, but this is what I'll say about it. It's on Amazon if you want to pick it up. He says, if any one of us go back into our adolescence or our like early 20s, sometimes for most of us, there's things in there that we got off to that we're not really proud of. We can look back on as we're adults and we're like, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. So the judgment behind paraphilias and attractions and arousals to things that we find weird, it's not really warranted because it goes back to the title of the book, Perv, the Sexual Deviant in all of us. We all probably have a moment in our lives where we have gotten aroused by something that now we look back and we're just like, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. But that's not to say that we were wrong for that. It's to say that the judgments are wrong. And that, like I said, everything is subjective. What one person views as gross, another person might not. And it really depends on the culture of where you are and what time you're in. And we really need to start looking at things from a more holistic perspective and see that, some things just are for people, some things aren't, but it's all subjective. And everything should be, just respected as long as harm isn't being caused, like mental harm, physical harm. Yeah, it's a natural thing that I think should just be viewed as viewed as a natural thing. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the taboo of just flatulence in general, and how it's out there, and how it's loud and smelly. But to me, that can be attractive in a way if you're looking at it from a pure point of it just being a very masculine act that shows virility, that you're ready to go. If you can see it like that, it becomes more easy to understand why people are attracted to it, especially, women and gay men and, bi men, people who are attracted to men and masculinity in general. It would be easy to see why they would be attracted to that if you look at it from a purely like scientific point of view, I guess. And the heterosexual side too. If you're talking about men being attracted to females, for example, the same thing.
For sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Would you, extrapolating from your theories, but speaking of which, I encourage anyone to, if not pick up the book, at least read the blog article on fartfetish.info. It is very interesting. What I'm extrapolating from that is, would you consider like smell being a very important aspect for you in the fart fetish, or is there other aspects that are equally important?
Smell, definitely. It's a very intimate thing. You really only show people that side of you if you're really close to them, because it does smell, it does stink. So you really only do that around people who aren't going to judge you. Yeah. And this is funny. I think this was reported on that scientifically a lot of people like the smell of their own farts, and I just find that funny because that's true for a lot of people. I know a lot of people say that the smell of their own farts they really don't mind when they're acting like. So, if you're attracted to your partner, I assume that it wouldn't be weird to be attracted to their parts either. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it definitely follows logically. So yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. So smell is it's a big factor for me. I guess the guy himself, I don't really have a preference with men. Like I like masculine men, feminine men. So just men in general. And just the social aspect of it. I like the social aspect of it. I like, the idea of, just men being around each other and being manly and not caring. And, it's a very like fiery, zesty, act that I think, looking at it from like an outside perspective, yeah, it is something that can be attractive. Just the masculinity of it. That's what this just for me, my personal opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you, maybe this is a dumb question, but I was curious, just in terms of, I don't know if logistics is the right word, but like, I think in your blog article you wrote that it's an attraction to the health of a person, but, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the I believe the implication of a healthy gut would thus produce less smelling farts, as in like a healthier person or someone on a healthier diet, healthier hygiene. Both of these things would produce farts that didn't have as much odor. Is that your experience? Is it just maybe it's not that they're odorless, it's the odor of the specific person, like their specific gut, even if it's healthy or not? Like what do you have any more like digging in on that?
I feel as for the health of that person, yes, I do agree with that. I feel like well everybody I feel like everybody's flatulence stinks to a certain degree. But as you said, like eating certain unhealthy foods can make it very like pungent, like very smelly. I think eating foods, certain foods like rich in fiber will make flatulence more common because of the way it interacts with the gut. Fiber, it's also good for your heart. And like everybody has different bacteria in their gut due to their own individual diet, but also due to their biology. So how a person's flatulence smells is like I guess like a combination of those two, their diet, which is like which is a choice, and their biology, which isn't. So it can be a combination of both. It can be, in my opinion, being attracted to a person's flatulence can mean you're attracted to either, their healthy lifestyle, how they eat, how they exercise, and the good bacteria that forms in their gut as a result from that, or just their own individual biology, just how they smell on the inside due to the bacteria they've been given from genetics. So it's a combination of both, in my opinion.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Like I don't know. You seem much more well read on it than I do. So I was just curious as your views on that. I want to jump back to what we were talking about earlier, but in a different way. What pushed you to want to come forward and talk today? Because I know you reached out to me and said you really wanted to share it and come on. And I was just curious what what was that feeling, and maybe what do you hope to be on the other side of this conversation, perhaps?
Yes. The real motivation for me wanting to come on was just to make a difference and let everybody know that they don't really have to hide part of themselves. They don't have to hide this shadow aspect of themselves, because it's not that. See, I feel like a lot of isolation due to sexuality stems from viewing it as such an abnormal thing that only a minority of freaks and perverts are attracted to. When, if one reads a lot of these, articles and books by, psychologists and psychiatrists, a lot of like these abnormal and atypical sexual perversions or fantasies are quite common. It's just, but like I was saying, we should judge them by the harm that they give out to society, not necessarily how disgusting they are. If they are considered disgusting to a majority of people, but they cause no harm, let it be. And the people who have that pedophilia will grow up to be healthy if they are just let to be, and if they are just let be and let them express their fetish in a way that is not judged. So my real motivation for coming on is just wanting to let people know that you're not that weird. Like, you might feel weird, you might feel like, oh, no one has this weird arousal, but sexuality is a very complex thing. I would encourage a lot of people to read into it and read into like scientific journals about it, books about it from psychologists and people like Sigmund Freud, who he had a lot to say about certain things, and I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but he actually was like an early gay ally. He actually wrote a letter, I feel like in the 30s, explaining how homosexuality is not an illness, it's not a vice, it's not a degradation. Those are his words exactly. It's not an illness, it's not a vice, it's not a degradation. In fact, many people who are homosexual are very intelligent. He named Leonardo da Vinci, who might have been gay or bisexual. He definitely was attracted to men, but we don't know if he was gay or bisexual. Michelangelo was homosexual. So the real motivation for me coming on was to tell you, you're not that weird. If you have this pedophilia, you're not that weird. And weirdness and being atypical in sexual manners should only really be a problem, an issue, an illness if it's causing you or somebody else great distress. Then you should get it checked out. But if it's just something you happen to enjoy that causes no harm, then just do it and have fun. It's not that weird. Things are relative. Paraphilias, atypical sexual fantasies, it's all subjective. So if you look at it from a holistic point of view, it's not that weird. So I just want to let your listeners know that they're not some kind of freak, and that sexuality is very complicated. And educating yourself about it and looking into it from a scientific point of view, it'll make you feel better about your own paraphilia, because you won't feel like a freak. Because the same people who are criticizing you and calling you a freak probably have gotten off the stuff in the past that they're not proud of. It's very hypocritical. The judgment is hypocritical. And if education can help that. So that's my purpose for coming on.
That's a great purpose. That is, I appreciate you saying all that. And yeah, I just all I can really say is like in terms of the United States, like as sexually free or promiscuous as people think it is here, it generally, it's still pretty Puritan in many cases. I mean, nudity isn't even really as acceptable here as it is in other parts of other parts of the world. So there's a lot to go forward with in terms of like sexual freedom. But what I wanted to say too was people are really maybe just in the United States, maybe all over the world, but people tend to be very set in their ways. So you talked about the past with like before homosexuality was more common, you had these advocates who were willing and brave enough or just like of the mindset to actually fathom it and think about these things as being natural and possible. Whereas I think we're in that place for fart fetishism, and I'm sure other paraphilias and kinks as well, is that people are starting to realize like this is okay to have. It's not, you're not just similar to how people like vilified and worse to homosexuals in this country, maybe around the world. Like it's, I'm not saying that kind of ostracization is going to happen with paraphilias, but you do get the sense of like, if you're talking to people outside of kink communities or kink understanding, they're very much closed off to it. They're much more willing to be judgmental about it and have strong opinions about it, even if they're not well read on the subject. So I think sexuality, like people are willing to accept like science discoveries when they're like, oh look, it's a new butterfly, we found a new species, and people are like, yeah, that's cool. Then you're like, oh, we found this lifestyle, this sexuality that's actually acceptable. People are like, nah, that's weird. That's not cool. Like I don't see how that's normal. So how can that be? You must be wrong, scientists. I'm sorry. It's like, no, like things can change in the paradigms that you understand. It just takes stretching your mind to do so. One other thing I'll add is the few people in our historical context that we know of that did talk about farting. We have, the Benjamin Franklin example, as I have on the website, as with the James Joyce example as well. Like Stephen King's example, that was a little more like cruel and not consensual, having his babysitter like fart on him, but at the same time, it is nice that he was able to at least talk about that experience and be brave enough to share that without fear of, I guess, being ostracized or being judged for that, like something he didn't even have control of.
Yeah. I read those on your website, and it amazed me how many, especially men. It's really common in the male community. There are some female ones, but I feel like it's more common with men that, like historically, that have like written about it and not been ashamed to talk about it. Even I think it was, I believe it was Mozart. I feel like he had, I believe he had like a dirty sense of humor also, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he wrote a parody song. Like it was like a complete parody, like because he just had a real dirty sense of humor. It was called like lick my ass or something like that. I believe that's correct because I know he did have a really like vulgar sense of humor, and he would like write parody symphonies and stuff like that. So if you can find that anywhere with a reliable source, then let me know. But I do remember seeing that.
Interesting. I Googled it real quickly, and a Wikipedia article does come up. I know Wikipedia is not the most reliable, but it seems like it's possible. I'll have to look into this more. I have not. I feel like I've maybe heard this in passing, but I didn't think about it at the time. But yeah, Leck, it's in German. Leck mich in Arsch. So yeah. Yeah, so it there is an article. You might have come on something that I haven't realized and put on. I have to make a note to add that to the website because that is actually very interesting. and another historical figure to add to the list of people who at least are in the periphery of the fart fetish. You have to imagine. Are there other fetishes that need to go with the fart fetish for you to enjoy it, like a ideal fantasy situation?
Fantasy, well, I enjoy them in all kinds of ways. Whether it's just hanging out with bros in like the locker room and people and the guy rips one, or if it's like more intimate with your lover or boyfriend or husband. I like that, like if it's just like you're cuddling under the sheets. Dutch ovens, like things like that. I actually wanted to ask you a question.
Achilles, yeah.
Do you have you noticed that this fetish is very popular in other countries outside ours, the US? Because I know this is popular in like very popular in Brazil and like England. Like a lot of the men that I see in the community are from those countries. Like it's very popular in those areas of the world.
For sure. I mean, I only have anecdotal, like, I mean, I think most everyone knows MFX or Fart Brazil, as they're often called, for their content, at least in the community, anyways. And then the UK is something I heard on this show. I think somebody said they were thinking about meeting or at least toying with the idea of like meeting someone, but because they were in the UK, it was too far. Surprisingly, like the analytics for the show indicate that the US is the most popular listenership. That could be also a language thing, but like even in other English speaking countries, the US is outperforming. At least in terms of listenership. Now, you could go the other way and say they're listening because they don't have as much freedom or strength to go out there and actually do it. That you have a lot of fetishists in the US that are fart fetishists and are repressed, so they're maybe trying to build up confidence, trying to hear other people's perspective about this fetish, maybe just interested in general. But for whatever reason, the U.S. is the prime demographic so far that has come on and listened to the show, which is interesting. But I do believe that there are probably more people doing the fetish, performing the fetish in different parts of the world.
Yeah, growing up, this might be just like unique to me, but growing up, like Brazilians, like those were the like if I were to go on the internet and look up like farting rose like Brazilian men, and like a lot of paraphilic fetish stuff would be Brazil. Not that there wouldn't be a large percentage in the United States. U.S. has a bigger population in general, more people here, so I of course there would be more people in the U.S., but it seems like just like you said, it's a niche fetish in the U.S. For some reason, in countries like Brazil, and this must like, I guess this is just me going off of what I've seen, but like it seems to be very popular there. I was talking earlier about how certain fetishes are considered milder. Like if you think about in the United States, having a foot fetish is not considered normal by any means, but it's a very mild fetish. Like you'll get a little bit weird looks, but it's kind of like whatever. It's a weird but mild fetish that no one really bats an eye to. Whereas like the prophilia here is like disgusting and it's a weird fetish. For some reason, and this could be like I could be completely off. Tell me if you agree or disagree. Like in countries like Brazil, it just seems so common. It seems like that's their equivalent of like having a foot fetish. It's like something that's common, but still weird, quote unquote, paraphilia, just mild.
It could be. You could be onto something there. I can't speak too much to Brazil. I can only speak to the maybe two things worldwide that I can think of, and they both relate to India. One, on Facebook, a lot of fetishists or a lot of people who are interested in fetish groups on Facebook are Indian. So there's that aspect. And if I had to guess, based on my own upbringing, it's partly, at least, because the idea of holding your fart for politeness or whatever is really not a thing. So like at work, like my dad will just fart in the office, and they don't smell. It's not like he's being rude, but it's just like he doesn't. It doesn't register to him that that's a weird thing to do, because it's not in his culture, in his understanding. He's not a city guy, but all the same, like his understanding of life is just like it would be like burping for most people. Like most people don't like hold back their burps. Some people do. I do, but like a lot of people just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna burp. I need to burp. Fuck it. But people don't feel that way about farting. But in other countries, I believe they do. So it's very possible that the mere exposure to that is how people in other countries start developing fetishes. Obviously, not everyone, because not everyone does have a fetish in other countries. But that's what leads me back to the thought I had in a previous show, and I think it's just one other show that I mentioned that I think the fetish may be inborn, that it's not, it's something certain people, certain biology, certain chemicals, whatever formed our certain people has, put that fetish DNA, the fart fetish DNA, on their helix or whatever. So, and some people don't have that, but the exposure to it is what leads it to come forward and be like, oh yes, I do like this. Because if you don't have that exposure, you'll probably just be like, oh yeah, I like to put my dick in an ass or a vagina, and that's life, because that's all I see. That's what TV shows me. That's what everything else shows me. For the most part, like now it's starting to get a little more flexible. There was that ass eating scene in Girls. I never watched Girls, but I know that scene definitely took the internet by storm for a day or so. So the fact that different sex acts are becoming more prevalent could be a good thing for the United States and other places that are more repressed, where people might have exposure to like, oh, I can eat someone's ass. That's okay. And you hear that too. Some people take a lot of pride in it. There's like, God forbid a man who doesn't eat ass, or something like that. It's like
Exactly.
they kind of punk on people who are like, oh, you don't eat pussy, you don't eat ass. What the fuck is wrong with you? So I think that's a good pendulum swing that is happening. But I agree with you. I think because of the repression of both sex and bodily function in many cases, the United States particularly is pretty stuck up when it comes to both, and then especially if you want to try to put them together. Because even listening to a few other podcasts that have talked about fetish, they usually ask the host, is like, oh, does your girlfriend fart around you? And then often, and it goes both ways. I've heard both, like, yes, they do, or no, they don't. But I've heard people be like, yeah, my girlfriend goes to the bathroom and farts, and I still hear it, and it's just like, that's not okay. It's like, but dude, it's like, this is bodily function. One, she already went to a place where, she's trying to be in private, but you're like, I can still hear it though. It's just like, it's so fucked up in a way that people can't be human. Like we've become people instead of like our naked human body selves. And that's not to say like society's wrong for like making us wear clothes. That makes sense. But like the further we stray from what a natural human is, I think the harder it is for people to be happy in life.
I agree. I agree. And that's why I think I mentioned it to you in it's either the blog post or one of my emails. I never really found anything, like even like growing up, like I never found it to be like an unnatural thing. It was just a thing that like this is something people do. Like it's just, it's a biological function. I never really thought of it as like something unnatural. If you really think like what is unnatural? Like it doesn't, like I don't, just like you were saying, I feel like, yeah, it is inborn, it is in our genetics, and that's why some people have the fetish and some people don't, because some people are exposed to it and that activates those genes that were already in them since birth, and somebody who doesn't have those genes, who's exposed to it, does not develop the fetish. It's why it exists in some of the population, doesn't in others. Like it's just part of the genetic draw that we get for being conceived. And just like homosexuality, bisexuality, being intersex, it's all just part of the lottery of options anybody can get. Asexuality, it's part of, it's all part of the lottery. So it's not about what you get if it like disgusts people or not. Because it's like you said, it's a natural thing and we shouldn't be stuck up about it. Just like I was saying earlier, a lot of people who, act like judgmentally towards people with atypical sexual interests, they're carrying a huge shadow with them because they're getting off to things that they think are immoral that really aren't, that they're just so stuck up, just like you said, in here in some parts of America. But yeah, I just feel like education is key. Getting to know, just not fearing sex or intimacy. Like what you were saying earlier about, that girl who like that guy was like still ashamed to have her fart around him. That was like that's your girlfriend, like especially if you want to be in a long-term relationship with somebody, you want to marry someone or have kids with someone, you want to be like part of them, part of their lives, and you don't want to deal with their natural bodily functions. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Have you we're coming down to the end, but I wanted to ask you, have you had any experiences like in person with this fetish?
Yeah, with my ex, which was very good. That's really only it, other than just like seeing stuff online. That's the only in-person experience I really had with it.
Could you talk a little bit about how that conversation went, or how that experience went, or both?
He was a lot like me, so even if he didn't share the same enthusiasm I had, he understood it from like a logical perspective and respected that. And yeah, he sometimes, would do it around me and I would like it. I feel like he was respectful about it, even though he was into it himself, but he just realized that, everybody can have different interests. That's really it.
That's cool though. That's cool. I mean, it doesn't. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be complicated or involved. It could be very simple, and then it's up to the other person how it goes from there. But like, it doesn't have to be a big like production to admit this. I mean, like I've gotten into practice of just like saying my fetish. Like I won't just offer it up, but if people ask me what I'm into, I'm not going to hide it anymore. I'll tell them what I'm like, and I'll maybe even tell them about the podcast as well, because I mean, I'm 36 years old. Like I've spent enough time hiding myself from the world. So if people don't want to accept it, then that's on them. Like I have we all have our short lives to live. So if we're not living it to the fullest and what makes us the most happiest, then we're missing out. And whenever you get the confidence to do that is great. You shouldn't feel like, oh, I wasted my life. It's whatever. Whenever you get in it, that's when you get in it. But the point is to do that, is to take that step and to find that comfort, because it doesn't help you to hide it. Like if you're done with the fetish, you want to throw it away, then yeah, sure, maybe that works for you. You can pretend, or not pretend, but you can get into vanilla sex or whatever other kind of sex you want to do, and maybe you'll be happy with that. But I think for the majority of us who are had this from birth, had it for a long time, whatever, we like this is the way forward, similar to people who and today, but people who felt gay in the past, like they felt like they had to hide it too and be secret, and like it's almost like a speakeasy for being sexual, and it shouldn't be that way. But the point is, it's not going to get any better for any of us until people do take that step, and people do start introducing themselves with this fetish in mind. Not introducing themselves, but speak of themselves with this fetish in mind as well as an element, because it's going to take all of us talking about it to make a change. Because the more people know fetishists, the more it becomes more acceptable. I believe the same thing happened with homosexuality. The more straight people, the more normies knew gay people, the more they're like, oh, this is acceptable. That I know Mark, he's normal. He's got nothing. There's nothing weird or like societally unacceptable about him. Like, it's cool. And I think that's the push we're trying to make now in kink in general, but specifically me is with the show and trying to push forward with this fetish.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. Like I was saying earlier, like education, just like reading up about this stuff from like scientific perspective, it'll make you realize how normal paraphilias, are. And they're only really called paraphilias because they disgust us. They're not normal in the sense of what we're supposed to be aroused by, but a lot of people in the general human population are aroused by different things, just like you said, depending on your culture. Like you said in India, how farting is not considered something that you should hide. So there are more like apocryphals over there. Like it depends on the culture. So if the majority is like against this fetish, then it doesn't really mean anything because it's just the majority in that culture. If you go to another culture, then it might be more acceptable. And like you said, stigmas will break down, and just education, just like educating yourself from like a cultural point of view and from a scientific point of view, psychological, just like reading books about it. And just, yeah, it'll allow you to view it as way more normal and natural and just a part of the human perspective, part of nature. I mean, nature's ugly. Nature, like, and I'm not saying like the procreation is ugly. Obviously, I'm aroused by it, but other people aren't. But they think that just because they aren't aroused by it, it's unnatural and disgusting and should be shunned. But that's just like saying something else in nature should be shunned. Like everything in nature happens because it just happens. And most apocryphals are not killing people or raping people or stealing or lying. So they're not doing a lot of evil things. They're just normal people who happen to be aroused by part of our bodies. Did I talk about the gut brain connection?
We touched on it a little bit, but I don't know if you said it specifically. Why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about it?
So basically, the tissue that our gut is made out of is, I believe, made out of the same material that our brain is made out of. And there is a system that connects our gut to our brain, and the bacteria that is in our gut, whether good or bad, can affect our brain and therefore affect our mental health and how we think and our thought process and how we feel. A blocked up gut or a gut with too much bad bacteria can actually cause depression in people. So I also believe that has something to do with procreation, is being aroused just by like mental health. I know that sounds crazy, but like being aroused by maybe their health, their intelligence, something going on in their brain, because obviously farts come from our gut, and if our gut is that connected to our brain, and that's where the term gut feelings comes from. That's why we say, oh, I have a gut feeling that that's going to happen, or that that's this, or this is that. It's because our brain and our gut are connected by the same tissue and the same system in our bodies that connects them and makes them interact with each other. And that's a proven scientific fact if you want to look that up. The gut brain connection, the gut brain axis. It's called a lot of different things. But if you want to look that up, there's books about it, it's on the internet. It sounds weird, like how can you be attracted to someone's mental health or someone's does a fart tell you if someone's mentally healthy? But it could. Because if that part of ourselves is connected to our brain and what's going on in our brain, psychologically, and our thought process and how we think, and mental disorders like depression, that could be a factor. Maybe being attracted to or being aroused by a fart is being aroused by a mentally healthy person.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that thought. This has been a very illuminating interview. I really appreciate you coming on. I have one more question for you, and then I'll open it up to if you have anything more to add. But what are your thoughts on the future of the fetish, whether it be just for you or the fetish at large or both, whatever you have ideas on?
I believe as we start getting more comfortable and taboos start breaking, then more fetishes will be seen as just acceptable. Because a lot of fetishes and paraphilias are really just things that are completely natural, but are just not societally acceptable to do in public. So that is very illuminating to me to see that okay, this stuff isn't unnatural. I just can't do it in public because it's rude. Like, burping is considered rude in public, but if you're in your house, you can just burp and no one cares. Um, Even public displays of affection, like even people don't like that in public. There are some parts of the world, some cultures, people don't like display like kissing, like even heterosexual couples kissing in public, people don't like. So it really depends on the culture. And if we can get people to just break down fetishes, especially like in relation to specifically a proctophilia, I was saying how I consider it a very male fetish. Even, like I saw something on Twitter that said, I think if there wasn't a stigma around farting, like every man would have a proctophilia, straight or gay, because it's just something men are just used to. So I don't know if I agree or disagree with that. I'm kind of neutral on that for now, but um, I think that's an interesting thought. Like if that stigma wasn't there, like if you remove stigma from sexuality, would more people have paraphilias or have a proctophilia? If farting wasn't considered like dirty, would like more people be into it? So yeah, I just think the future of this fetish, it all has to do with the breaking down of taboos and walls and barriers, societal barriers, sexual barriers. And I kind of worry sometimes because in 2022, with all the things going on in the South, like with abortion and LGBT rights, like at least in the United States is getting a little bit more conservative for my taste. And I see this change happening in other parts of the world, but the southern United States is just getting way out of hand. And I kind of worry about that when it comes to gender roles and sexuality because they seem to be wanting to reverse a lot of progressive ideas. And politically I'm neutral, but at the same time I feel I have like core values, and I feel like certain rights are part of them. In certain countries, I see the fetish skyrocketing because of breaking downs of conservative old values that don't serve a point. And some countries are going to get more rigid sexually. Should they? Absolutely not. I feel like restricting sex is restricting a large part of our humanity. And without it, people become repressed, and repression is not good. It's just not good. And if there was no repression, then we would be living in a happier, society. A lot of people don't want to realize that, but it is what it is. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're definitely right about that. It's definitely been a interesting. Like my hope is that this is the predictable overreaction to the pendulum doing its swing to the towards more sexual and expressive freedom is my hope. Like because there's definitely more people working at this cause. The show I went on, my friend's podcast, Ask Ezra, he his whole kind of thing is leaning towards radical sexual acceptance, and my hope is that that idea continues to spread because you're right. There's really no good reason for safe sexual repression, like if you're having criminal thoughts, that's a different story, but like for just like two or more, I guess, two partners that are just enjoying themselves and enjoying what they do in their own privacy and in their own home or whatever, like it that's where we should be. It's very surprising that we live in a time where it seems people want to take the step back. But my hope is that's just very well coordinated media campaigns, and then the people that will then justifiably get riled up by that. But my hope is that's a loud minority rather than an actual majority movement. I think the polls seem to indicate that, but you never know. You never know with this kind of polling. But all the same, you're 100% right. There should be a lot more sexual freedom. But I know we're not the only country that is repressed. But my hope is, at least for us, I'm not like, I don't wish the world ill, but we can really only control and to a minimal degree the world around us. So my hope is, this show, other shows, whatever, the general push of kink and BDSM lifestyle, I hope that'll push people forward into accepting, being more free, all of these good things.
Like switching roles, no, I admire BDSM for, the switching of gender roles, like men performing women's gender roles and vice versa. I like that, because it loosens the binary and it like allows people to experience the other side. And I feel like as a society, we kind of need that, we kind of need the breaking down of barriers and restrictions to an extent. Obviously, you still need restrictions. Like people can't just do anything like rape, that's completely unacceptable under any circumstances. But like loosen some restrictions, and like gender roles are one of them. So I actually admire BDSM for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Raz, this has been a great talk, and I'm very, very thankful that you reached out to me and that you came on today. I think this is going to be great. I mean, every interview has been great, but I really think this one, it really helps people to hear other fetishes, other perspective. Every perspective we've had has been unique in its own way. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us.
Thanks, Raj. And can I ask one more quick question?
Please, of course.
Have you listened to the Hey Poopy podcast, especially the episode with Frank Vignola?
I'm sorry, what was the podcast called?
The Hey Poopy podcast.
No, I haven't heard of it.
I'll send you the link after. But they talk about just like toilet health and stuff like that. And they had a guest on he's actually a male life coach, like a life coach for men, and he talks about like farting and how it can actually be healthy for like the young male and everything like that, and how it's a sign of masculinity and virility and healthy masculinity. And I'll send you the link after the show, but it's a really good episode, and I think you might like it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but definitely send it to me, and I'll definitely take a listen. Maybe it'll go on the site as well, and I'll do when I eventually get to it, I'll do a analysis, because I've been with all these interviews, I haven't actually gotten to do an episode alone and talk about it. But I think honestly, people prefer to hear from other people, which I'm not unhappy about. So I'm glad to do it. But yeah, I definitely will listen to it and see what I can get out of it. I'm sure it'll be very good. Thank you once again, Raz. See you next time.